Welcome to Sense and Sustainability, your podcast channel for sustainable procurement. We hope you like what you hear. Please go to www.iso2400.org for more information, learning resources, tools, and much more.
Hello, I'm Sean McCarthy, Director of Action and Sustainability Community Interest Company, and it's my pleasure today to introduce Tarun Batchu from the United States. Welcome, Tarun.
Hey, thanks for being here. Thank you for inviting me.
So, would you like to tell us a bit about yourself? Tell us about your background and how you became involved in sustainability.
Yeah, I'm Tarun Batchu. I'm an incoming junior at ONTAG Liberty High School in the United States. And I've always been interested in environmental sustainability from a young age. But in the last 6 or 7 years, I've gotten interested in environmental technology. So I've worked on certain projects with companies and institutions which have focused on either carbon capture technology, pyrolysis, and stuff like that. These futuristic envirotech ideas. And I'm also interested in spreading awareness and advocacy of environmental problems, whether that's something like light pollution or equipping people internationally with education on environmental sustainability. That's also something I'm really interested with. So that's kind of my background. I got really interested and really had a spike for environmental science about 3 years ago when I realized how significant of a problem it was.
So, would you like to tell us about some of the projects that you've worked on? Because they sound like really quite innovative and new and refreshing. So, let's hear a little more about things that you've worked on.
Yeah, so there's specifically two projects that comes to mind. The first one is called AS Caged, which is basically a modular and portable system that you install on top of smokestacks. And what it does is basically a new refined way of carbon capture technology. And there's Mr. technology that's being used as the gases are coming out of the smokestacks, which is used to condense those gases at a very low temperature into liquids. So that allows for easy storage and transportation because otherwise those gases would end up in the atmosphere. But instead, we can have those liquids stored underground or a place where they aren't that harmful. And the other one is called Trident, which I've been working on more recently with the World IP Solutions, Lemelson MIT, and institutions like that. What this one is about is it's a biomass pyrolysis device, which is very innovative, not because it's entirely new, but because there is no consumer grade biomass pyrolysis devices in the world whatsoever, which aren't not just catered towards institutions or industry, but actually catered towards individual farmers, individual people in second and third world countries. So that's the goal of Trident. It uses some innovative technologies such as net zero emissions. There's recycling of natural gases that are being emitted from the device to actually spin turbines to generate electricity to power the device. And there's there's an aspect of a centrifuge chamber. There's some innovative aspects, but the real whole concept is to take these industrial aspects, take these concepts of pyrolysis, which are geared towards industry and not towards the individual person, and then scale it down to a consumer grade where it's more applicable by the community or individual people.
So, if we take the pyrolysis one, as you say, pyrolysis is not new, but it's not exactly widely used either, is it? And my understanding of pyrolysis is it's pretty much on a big industrial scale.
Right.
Because of the amount of heat energy you're using to create the pyrolysis means that it needs to be at a certain scale. But what you're saying is you're working on something that could be used in a domestic house or in a farm. How would that work?
Yeah, so my first iteration or the first step of pyrolysis devices we created was something that'd be catered towards individual houses in developed countries like mine and yours, I'm assuming. But then we moved to something that's probably more unique and impactful, considering that the average person isn't likely going to use a pyrolysis device anyways. Probably too much effort, right? So we moved towards this concept of biomass, which is agricultural waste, sometimes even sewage sludge. And so we're trying to use pyrolysis in a way that uses these materials to create biofuel. So the way that it works is basically the same components of a pyrolysis device, but it's a lot more compact, and its configuration is built in a way where it's a lot more efficient than typical industrial pyrolysis devices. There's some innovative aspects such as recycling. There's a new type of catalyst that we use. But essentially, the concept is to make it compact in a way that doesn't have to just be used by individual households, likely not affordable for individual households in third world countries anyways. But the concept is to be used by a community at large, and then your profits would be made back, or you'd have it paid back over a course of a couple of years.
Okay, so if you were to use one of these machines, say in a farming environment, you're saying the output from this pyrolysis process is potentially biofuel.
Yeah.
Presumably it could be used on the farm.
Yeah, of course.
Wow. What are the barriers to this? Because there's, if you look at that, it sounds like a fantastic idea. I mean, sewage
Right.
sludge all being wasted in the farm goes into this machine, and the machine uses some technical magic and it turns it into biofuel that I can put in my tractor. But it's not as simple as that, is it? Because there's a lot
Right.
of regulation around fuels.
Of course, yeah.
Examples. So what progress are you making in terms of making this technology sort of legally compliant?
Yeah, there's really two big issues there. The first is refining the gas itself.
Yeah.
So when the biofuel does come out of the device and when pyrolysis does occur, it's not very refined. So it isn't like typical grade that you could probably put in your tractor.
Yeah.
And at that point, the carbon emissions that come out of it would actually be higher than typical gasoline. So it's really ineffective. So the whole point that we're working on is trying to have it be refined in a way that's one more applicable to like common uses in farms and households in developing countries across the world, but also in a way that's like very convenient for people to use. And on top of that, the second issue is like most pyrolysis devices use catalysts, like bentonite or physical catalysts. Our goal is to try to make something that's non-tangible. That's like one of the most innovative aspects of my device. And so basically there's like technology that we use to try to catalyze the reaction without the user physically putting in like gravel or bentonite or something like that. So that's what we call like a cold plasma centrifuge chamber, which basically uses a combination of very cold and very hot temperatures to catalyze the reaction itself. So this is what we're working with. This isn't very feasible always, especially when the device isn't really backed up to an electrical source. There has to be manpower involved, but the whole point is to automate the process and to make it as easy as possible. So that's the steps that we're kind of refining right now and making better.
So how are these projects funded? Is this like academic funding? Is big industry involved in funding these projects? How does the financial side work?
Yeah, so there's a lot of academic funding, like competitions, competitive events, but there's also institutional funding. So from colleges or other grants that work on this program, like there's the agricultural aspect to the United States, or they have agricultural programs that would like to be interested in this program or just try to support it. And for me, it's kind of easier even because I'm a youth participant who's leading this project. So there's more opportunities. People are more willing to give out grants, especially because there's not a lot of competition there's not like a lot of options for youth that are working on environmental technology initiatives. So that's where the funding is coming from. A lot of the stuff that I do is more design methodology. So testing out individual components and stuff like that across and down the line in a couple of years. Then after I get my project refined, then I'd be able to go to like large companies like ExxonMobil or other gas companies and then propose something to actually build and make it come to life.
Yeah, so this is very early days development, and then
Right, of
you
course.
work with a company to bring it up to scale. The smokestack device that you talked about, so is that for an industrial application or domestic application? How might that work?
That one is actually for industrial application. So yeah, it's complete industry. It's like a whole system. So that one I'm trying to work with ExxonMobil right now because they have their CCT initiatives, which is carbon capture technology. And their initiative is actually very efficient. But I think like a combination of these smokestacks and the way they recycle carbon capture technology or recycle these emissions and store underground is something very effective. So I'm trying to foster that partnership, maybe get some funding there to actually build one of these devices and try to implement it within their scheme of carbon capture technology.
So is this something that would capture the carbon and store it locally?
Yeah.
Whether if you've got a factory or a steel works or a cement works or whatever, it would actually capture the carbon and enable it to be stored on site?
Yeah. Typically it's on site, like a couple 100 feet down below the surface.
Yeah. Because that's quite amazing because the carbon capture and storage projects that I see in the UK, they're having to pipe the stuff like miles across the
Right.
country. So you capture the carbon and then you push it across the country to some plant somewhere that actually stores the carbon, if you like. And it feels to me like a really
Efficient.
big industrial program that's
Right.
never going to work economically.
Right. I
But
agree.
so this is something totally different that's all about storing the carbon locally.
Right.
No, that sounds absolutely amazing. Yeah, it's completely out of left field. How do you feel about working with organisations called ExxonMobil? Because you could argue that these are the people that made billions of dollars screwing up the planet, and now they're trying to make more billions of dollars cleaning up their own mess. How do you
Yeah.
feel about that? Without getting too controversial, but how do you feel about
Yeah,
that?
so I think that goes for all institutions and companies. So I think most companies in the world are hurting the environment. I think that goes undoubtedly.
Yeah,
Um, some companies are trying to make a step forward and trying to like innovate and push for other companies to do the same, where they try to improve the process and try to minimize or mitigate how bad they are for the environment. So I think that companies like ExxonMobil are undoubtedly going to hurt the environment, right? But the whole part of initiatives like carbon capture technology and the hundreds of millions of dollars they invest into that is to one, make a change in the community, to be a leader, and to motivate other companies to do the same. Because the carbon capture technology that they like talk about isn't very like specific to ExxonMobil itself. It goes for all biogas companies and sometimes even other companies like large multinational institutions.
yeah.
So the whole point is to be a leader and to sprout the start, but also to make a personal like step towards minimizing their own impacts. So I think, to be honest, like the way that we want to reach our environmental goals isn't to completely eliminate carbon emissions. It's to minimize it as much as possible. And I think that at least trying something to like work towards that step is pretty impactful. But of course, they are still hurting the environment.
Yeah, no, I mean, I'm inclined to agree with you. I work as a consultant, and I always think, well, you know, the really good guys, they actually don't need my help. It's the
Right.
not so good, it's the bad guys that want to turn themselves into the good guys that really need the help and the support. So I think it's important that we do that. Again, from a personal point of view, you're obviously a young guy with lots of interesting projects to get involved in. Where do you see your own future? How do you see yourself? You're obviously going off to college and you're going to get some more qualifications and education, but where next for you personally?
Yeah, so I'm interested in personally a lot of fields. I like AI, tech, I like business. I also like environmental engineering a lot. So I'm actually undecided of what I want to major in college. I still have 2 years left in high school. But for me, like environmental engineering has always been like a passion project or something that I'm like really passionate about. So I think maybe there's like a opening for me to pursue it in college and maybe in the future. I think that'd be super interesting. But also I don't think actually the best way to improve the environment is to directly innovate always. I mean, I think it's important to be a leader and try to actually push innovation. But I think there's other ways also. I think advocacy is very important. I think even simply like donating money for grants and for funding other projects is going to be really impactful. So I think there's a bunch of ways to actually help the environment on a personal level. But I think that the way that I would choose most is advocacy and innovation. But
Yeah.
yeah, I still haven't decided my college major or what I want to go down in the future.
No, you got plenty of time. How are you seeing? I guess the impression I get, being a person at the other end of the age spectrum to you, it appears to me that younger people care more about these issues. How do you feel about that? What are your friends and the people that you interact with? What are their feelings about these environmental issues?
Yeah, I would say like the typical 16-year-old probably doesn't care. But I'd
Mm,
say that that do care and do identify the issue to be like one that's very true and like very persistent, one that's happening right now, very current. I think
yeah,
they typically care more than the average person. So I think like most people don't care, but those that do care a lot.
yeah,
I think the reason why is that like I feel like for those people that are older, it's like environmental issues has been something that's been like always been talking like has always been talked about. It's always there. But I think for someone my age, it's like really easy to get a grasp and like to actually understand how bad the environmental conditions of the world are. I mean, I think there's like very current and very like persistent effects on the world, like natural disasters, there's oil spills, like a bunch of negative things that are happening to our world. I think that it's like very easy and very comprehensive to understand that. Like any 16-year-old can look into the ocean and see that there's plastics which are getting caught up in like I don't know like turtles or fish. Like that's a very easy problem to identify and understand. And I think that like sprouts innovation that actually sprouts like the idea of trying to help or trying to change something.
yeah. It doesn't take a genius, does it, to see the extreme weather
Right.
events that we're seeing around the world, and the wildfires and the hurricanes and everything that's just becoming
Right.
more prevalent than it has in the past. That's absolutely brilliant, Tarun. Thanks very much for your perspective, and it certainly makes me feel optimistic. There's people like you in the world that are going to take this agenda forward. Is there, before we close, is there anything else that you'd like to cover, that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, there'd be nothing specific, but I think like an aspect that I didn't really cover is education about environmental sustainability. And I
Mm,
think you guys do a lot of that, which is like also really impactful and inspiring. But I think I think something that I'm really interested also, I think should be taken with like a lot of seriousness is like actually educating the youth on environmental sustainability and also technologies. So I work with institutions like the Invention Convention Worldwide, which is basically a place that we foster innovation within children. We encourage them to do competitive events, actually compete. So we have students across China, Mexico, United States that compete in local invention conventions, and then they basically just make it up the chain to the Worldwide Invention Convention. So the program that I'm working on right now is actually trying to spread invention convention to other countries and also underprivileged areas within the three countries that I already mentioned. So I think like the goal here is to basically equip students with the knowledge and understanding of environmental issues and the concept of critical thinking to actually have them tackle these issues firsthand. So I think that's also really important, like just equipping the youth with just with like one, how serious the issue is, but also like critical thinking to actually solve these issues. I mean, I've seen like a bunch of inventions from other student inventors that aren't like incredibly complex or technology based, but still like very impactful, like biodegradables or like biomaterials. I think these are all like really impactful, but I think that all comes with actually encouraging the students to do or take that step in the first place. So yeah, I just wanted to leave people with that message that like education is also really important and that we need to spread the word.
that's great, thank you. It's really useful. There's some people in our network I'd quite like to put you in touch with that are working with young people around the world in a kind of similar context.
Of
So
course.
yeah, I might be able to help you there with a couple of people I've spoken to quite recently, actually one this morning. So yeah, that will be really good. Yeah, thanks for that. I think you're absolutely right, because it's even if somebody comes up with an invention that doesn't work, at least they've given it some thought, and
Right.
and and then they're engaged in that process, aren't they? Because not if you're inventing things just by its very nature, a lot of things that you invent are either not going to work, or they're not scalable, or you can't get any commercial interest. But if you can get people at the right age, at the school age, as you have, at least thinking about these things, then they become more aware of the environmental issues, and can hopefully be better people going forward.
Right.
Brilliant. Taryn, thanks very much. That was really useful. I think our audience are going to be fascinated to hear about some of the projects that you're working on. And in particular, yes, you work in education as well. And we'll see if we can help to connect you with some of the people.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me on here.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for listening to our podcast on sense and sustainability. Please listen out for more episodes. For more information, learning resources, tools, and much more content on sustainable procurement, go to www.iso2400.org.